Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Kappa podcast. I'm super excited today to have Joyce Lin, Head of Developer Relations at Postman, on. Joyce, why don't you go ahead and say hi and start the interview off by introducing yourself and what you do at Postman?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm the head of developer relations at Postman, and I'm guessing most of your people, most of your audience is probably pretty dev centric, so maybe
Yeah.
they know Postman already. Okay. So Postman is right now we're like 25 million developers and testers and DevOps people, and so I love talking about community. I love talking about developer relations. Uh, what questions do you have for me?
Actually, let's just start right there. How do you actually think about managing a developer community at Postman? What are sort of the big pillars, the big initiatives you guys look towards?
Yeah, so I love talking to my counterparts at other big companies, and I like to see how they're organized too. So at Postman, it's changed over the years, especially with the stage of our community, the maturity of our community, the maturity of our product. And right now, developer relations is advocacy, community, and then education. And so again, that's changed over the years, and every year we have a different sole focus, but that's our focus right now.
That's really, really cool. In terms of not to necessarily pick them one by one, but curious how you think about dev advocacy, because it's a topic like when talking to other folks, it can be a little bit hard to define at times. Um,
Yeah, and I started as a developer advocate at Postman, and I've been with the company almost 7 years now. So advocacy has changed a little bit at
yeah,
Postman, and I this is another question I love seeing, like what do advocates do at other companies?
yeah,
And at Postman, it's you can think of it more as an advocate for the community.
yeah.
So yes, we are in charge of like communicating new releases and educating people on like proper workflows, but it's really understanding the day in the life of the community so that you have the empathy for when a new feature comes out and it meets certain needs, then you know who to talk to, and when it doesn't meet certain needs, then you're talking with the product team.
Gotcha. And when you talk about sort of the Postman community as a whole, is there like a central meeting place? You'd say like all the community always gets together here to have conversations, or is that more of a almost like a concept that puts the forums, the videos, the live streams, everything together, in person events, meetups, or how
No,
do you
no,
think
no.
about?
That no central meeting source exists for any
No,
community, I would bet. Yeah.
no,
So it's everywhere developers exist, right? Everywhere testers exist. And some people are, you know, strictly online. Other people like meetups, in-person meetups. Other people are in the forums. Other people are on social media.
yeah.
And I there is some overlap, but it's so disparate that you almost have to be everywhere to meet your developers where they're at.
Yeah, I think that's probably the unfortunate but kind of true answer given just the complexity here.
Yeah.
Um, what I'm curious now, having like thinking about sort of DevRel Postman for the better part of 7 years. You said, how's that changed since you started out to today? What like has the overall sort of shift in how you view developer relations changed?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple insights that I've gained over time, but it's really about the stage. I keep saying stage, but like, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like, you're still
yeah,
finding product market fit, then you're going to be focused on awareness, or you're trying to break into adjacent segments, and then you're just kind of like thinking about terminology and just understanding the space a little bit deeper. A couple insights that I've learned over the years, though, are one is when I first started at Postman way back when I was knee high to
yeah,
a grasshopper, we were already 3 million, like a community of 3 million developers, right? So I was really trying to create content like I was one of the first in developer relations. And so I was just trying to plug all these holes because we had nothing about APIs or like just basic content,
sure,
documentation, all of that super basic. So I was trying to plug the holes. And at that time, it's trying to talk to the broadest segment possible. So even if you'll look back at some of the early content, it's super broad, super general.
yeah,
But then after a time, you can't be so broad and so general. And in fact, some audience will rebel against that, where it's just like developers are not all the same. How come you don't talk to me, I'm a test engineer, or like me, I'm a DevOps engineer. I don't identify as a data engineer, and so everyone has their own identity. And so the more specific and targeted you could be with your content, it ends up being better. But in the beginning, you can't do that.
No, right. There's just limitations on it. Maybe a big part of the audience are often folks that are just actually getting started with their community. Like a common conversation we often have is like, hey, we just hit 5,000 stars or 10,000 stars overnight on our GitHub repo. Like, oh my God, we need to build a community around this project. It's taking off. That's especially true now in the age of a lot of these AI projects that are growing super rapidly. Any thoughts or reflections or advice even to these kinds of folks that are just starting out, that might have a project that's picking up steam, that has a couple of thousand users? How do you create that good developer experience early on when you are super resource
constrained? Well, a couple things. One is, it's kind of hard. So like, I'm just trying to put myself in the mind's eye of a project that has really good stars, but maybe not broad awareness, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, what about my community, right? How do I create company X or project X's community? And that's a little bit like a vanity, right? Like, who's to say you have a community? You do have a community, but who says that they identify as being part of your community? And so really understanding how people identify and then meeting them where they're at. I mean that tactically, but also philosophically. So if somebody identifies as being like a front end web dev, let's say, like just understanding how they identify and then not trying to mold them to part of your identity, but maybe you're part of their entire tool chain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean,
no,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I find that really interesting. And you also kind of touched on one point there that I'm sure a lot of folks could sort of take some learnings from, which is, just because you have a bunch of developers as stars doesn't exactly mean you have a good community. What are some of the signs you've seen, especially now as Postman's community evolves? Like, what are some of the signs that you have a healthy community, you have folks that are helping each other out, that you are sort of moving community in the right direction, if you will?
Yeah. So after a certain point, if you can be so lucky, you start to have self-organizing community, right? Outside of people who get paid to organize community. So we have people with community in their job title that work at Postman on the Postman payroll, but there's other people that have built their entire brands around APIs. And like, API is
Right.
Postman's community, but this is where I'm saying people aren't identifying as, I'm an API engineer. Maybe they have that title, but they probably don't say that is my community, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I was just going
go
to say
ahead.
it's really branching out and identifying what are the sub communities within, like who identifies as a test engineer, who identifies as QA, who is really building APIs internally, and how do you build content around all of these different subgroups is what I'm hearing you say.
And I've been I can't, like, the Postman community is so huge, 25 plus million, and part of my team, developer relations, is very modest. It's like 6 or 7 people. So we can't keep up with it. But what can we do to help elevate the voices that are going on outside of Postman, the company? And so I forget who said this. It might be Amir Shavat, but like some famous like DevRel person said, what do people do this for? It's for fame, love, or money, right? So you can give people thanks. You can give them cash. Totally valid, I've been a part of promotional programs where you create content in exchange for cash, valid, and fame. Postman has a huge platform, so if we can get a guest blog or get you on a live stream, like, you get some kudos.
That's really cool. And maybe speaking to some of these initiatives, then, Joyce, I'm curious, because folks generally tend to come to the podcast too to learn a little bit about best practices across the board. For example, we recently had the folks from Airbyte on, and they kind of told the story of how they're thinking about now reorganizing the community a little bit, because it was just getting to a point where the team, I think, was almost struggling to sort of keep up with all the questions coming in, servicing the community, etc. And they transitioned to sort of having office hours instead. Always trying to have this one-to-one relationships. Just one example of sort of an initiative folks are doing that seems to be working. Any of these sort of best practices you think you and the team have learned at Postman that are interesting to potentially share with other DevRels out there?
Man, I'm just trying to think like we don't have the one-to-one relationship. We have a one
No.
to few. I personally know several people by name that I regularly talk to in our community, but
Yeah.
there's no way we could be all
Can't do
over
it.
social media, be all over support, Stack Overflow. People have trouble with their homework questions and they're like thinking it's a Postman issue when it's really that API's issue. Um, there's no possible way we could get behind it all. And so the best that we can do is just to provide the place, the forum,
Yeah.
or like the
Yeah.
discourse. I'm using brand names, but like to provide the place and
Yeah.
give people the tools to then have the conversations with each other.
That's really, really helpful. Uh, Any other in terms of just like reflecting back on the last couple of years, any other interesting sort of moves or initiatives that you and the team have launched where you've now looked back on them and go like, oh wow, that really kind of worked better than expected. That was kind of cool. The community seems to be really receptive towards that.
Something that we're working through right now, and I don't know what the right answer is,
Yeah.
and I don't know if it'll be the same right answer in 2 months or 2 years.
Yeah.
But one is talking about syndicating content. And this is something that I talk with a lot of DevRel teams about. I have a a piece of content, okay, a seed of a content,
Yeah.
and do I syndicate it across all those different communities that we're talking about in all the different channels, or do I leave my seed and then just all roads lead to this one seed,
Hmm.
right? So there's an SEO play here, right?
Right.
Where I want this to rank the highest, but I want it to also satisfy the need of being able to reach the most eyeballs so that I can help the most people, right? And so I don't know what the right answer is, but I've talked to so many DevRel departments that are working on syndication right now. How do you syndicate this seed into a video, in a short video, long video, social media piece, into a conference talk, into a meetup topic, and so it's squeezing the most out of the seed, I think, is the absolute right thing to do. But how you actually then go to market with the seed is kind of that trade-off, that tension between SEO and then actually servicing your community. I don't know the answer to that at this point in time.
Yeah, but that's a really interesting question. Hoping some folks will reach out after this to sort of share their thoughts and ping. Because it's a bit of a conundrum, right? I definitely get the trade off. Um, this was really cool, Joyce. I want to be mindful of your time. We like to keep these sort of short and
Sure.
snappy, if you will, over a coffee break. Any closing thoughts, pieces of sort of parting advice to the community as we close down here?
Something that I've been pleasantly surprised about, and I mean, it speaks to this podcast alone, but in developer relations, in community building, the people that I've had the pleasure of like just talking to at conferences or talking to on forums, they're so willing to share their key metrics. They're so willing to share things that they've learned. There's conferences, whole conferences dedicated to sharing this, and whole communities dedicated to sharing community building. And so definitely chime in. Let me know what your team's doing, and just share some of what you're struggling with or what you found to work, because rising tide lifts all ships.
Let's leave it on that quote. I love that. All right. Thank you very much for taking your time, Joyce, and have a great rest of your day.
Of course, it was a pleasure. Thank you.